Crusader series of the year, and we are excited to have Robert Wilson with us here tonight. He is a licensed clinician who has his own practice and also does work with us here at the school with our students. And so he's going to speak tonight on ADHD, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Hi, TV land or YouTube land or Facebook. Thank you. So this is with a commitment to wanting to educate our parents, in conjunction with WCS, to make the best decisions for our kids with ADHD. So, just some stats. I'm not going to run through all of this, but I think a major stat is the fact that there's 7 million children in the US aged between 3 to 17 have been diagnosed with ADHD, according to the National Survey of Parents using data from 2022. And this is all widely available from the CDC. The reason why we have more kids diagnosed now with ADHD is because of better assessment methods. It's always been with us, really. It's always been with us. There's been a lot of kids who, in the past 20, 30 years ago, were marginalized in the classroom. You can't understand, you can't keep up. Now with the better assessment methods, we're able to detect ADHD. It's more common in boys than in girls for some reason. There's a few different reasons for that. It's how it's presented in boys. Boys typically, when it comes to the presentation of ADHD, boys typically have more externalizing behaviors of it. Girls, it's more internalizing, and so it's more difficult to detect with girls than with boys. There's a bunch of stats there regarding ethnicity and different some different figures there. So the diagnostic standards. One of the things I want to say is this: ADHD is not a learning disability. It's not. They say that Marie Curie, Henry Cavendish, Albert Einstein, all had this symptomatology of ADHD when they were growing up. So it's not a learning disability. There's a great book by a doctor called Halliwell. It's called Driven to Distraction. Some of the most brilliant minds have ADHD. There's a lot of professors that work at Johns Hopkins University, ADHD. I just say this because a lot of people say it's a learning disability. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder. So, multifaceted, profoundly affects children's ability to function effectively in various aspects of their lives, including academic, social, and family environments. Okay, so children diagnosed with ADHD display specific behavioral patterns characterized by levels of inattentiveness, hyperactivity, or impulsivity that are inappropriate for their developmental age. So you can find a lot of kids clearly who fidget a lot, who can't focus. Years ago, I used to give kids fidget spinners who can't focus, and you think, well, why can't you sit still? Well, it's because of this, and it's dopamine in their brain. In other words, they cannot delay rewards, so they're very impulsive. Dopamine helps you delay rewards. Then there's norepinephrine, which gives kids motivation. Norepinephrine also filters out noise in the background, so it enables kids to focus. My son has ADHD, and he would say, Dad, there could be a fly circling around, and he said, I would just be on the fly for hours. Really, he wasn't able to filter out that information. And then also, the other thing too, is memory encoding or consolidation, right? Being able to take a temporary memory and make it permanent. That is also difficult with kids with ADHD. So not being able to retain information correctly and actually store it, and that all goes on the process between the hippocampus and the amygdala. The most important brain dysfunction with ADHD, the part of the brain, is the PFC, the prefrontal cortex. And so the prefrontal cortex is all about executive functioning. And executive functioning is essentially top-down decision making. People with ADHD cannot do that effectively. And so you'll find a lot of impulsive behavior. Here's another thing too that you will find with people who have inattention with ADHD, or the combined type, hyperactivity and inattentiveness. You will find that there is a lack of motivation, because norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter that stimulates motivation. So when you see your child is intellectually curious, his norepinephrine is working fine, right? So you have a lot of kids, they have the intellectual firepower without the motivation. So they get bored very easily. And I've seen a lot of people, even my adults, who, so I'm not sure if anyone's aware of this, so there's been a shortage of Adderall and Concerta. Adderall is amphetamine and Concerta is methylphenidate. So there's been a shortage, and I've heard, oh, but I can't work, oh, I can't focus, oh, I don't want to work, oh, I'm so bored. And it's because of the lack of norepinephrine and dopamine in the mind. And this is why you get a lot of kids with very impulsive behavior, because the lack of dopamine prevents them from delaying rewards. Dopamine helps a child or an adult actually have a sustained outlook on rewards, so you don't need it right now. It's a very famous test in psychology. It's called the marshmallow test, and it was about kids were tested to see if you will, at least so you know about it, it's even a book about it. We're tested to see, can you handle having one marshmallow now, or can you wait and have 3 later? And boom. And I'm going to say this as well. People with a lack of dopamine and ADHD in adults, it does really affect your life. You will find, for example, a lack of ability to invest, wanting to spend now, wanting it now. It's really very comprehensive, the differences it makes. You know, and so you see a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck because boom, that whole idea of retail therapy, gotta spend it now. And it doesn't matter how much money they make. And so that marshmallow test was all based on that. And it was also it was a longitudinal study, which means a longitudinal study is that they follow the kids for life when they do this study. and see what they're like as adults. And they show that the inability to delay gratification just manifested in so many areas of their lives. So, difficulties with attention, hyperactivity, etiology of it, meaning the cause of it, multifaceted, complex, mostly genetics, environmental has been tested, smoking while pregnant, environmental factors though, toxins, things like that, neurological factors, brain differences, that kind of stuff. Early identification and diagnosis are critical, and I will say this, the reason why they're critical is you don't want your child to be in a classroom and see, and I've worked with kids over the years, and see other kids finishing tasks, and then, wow, I'm not as quick. What is going to happen? They're going to inculcate this idea that they're not as bright, which is not true. Really, this is not true. So it's very important that they are able to be able to keep up and know that they can effectively compete with their friends. There's a lot of kids, if there's not early detection and some form of way of mitigating, right, the symptoms, if there isn't, then these things can be internalized and they can hold that, no, I'm not good enough, no, I'm not one of the bright kids, and can cause self-isolation, depression, anxiety. I mean, anxiety is comorbid with a lot of ADHD anyway. My son used to have really bad anxiety. ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, is comorbid. Depression, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, also often gets diagnosed alongside ADHD. Okay, so early detection is very important. Early detection is important because this kid who thinks less of himself, he could be Harvard potential with the right treatment, really. So, so research shows that children with ADHD are at heightened risk for adverse outcomes, including academic failure, social isolation, coexisting mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, contributing to a diminished quality of life. So I think it's very important that, and it's so heartbreaking the amount of kids that, no, I'm what they call themselves. It's just so heartbreaking for me as a clinician to hear that and tell them, no, it's not true. So talking about medication, so I am not a puppet or a lobbyist or anything like that for the meds. This is just purely about getting kids the correct treatment that they need. And my son is on medication, really, and my son's in his 3rd year of law school, and I can say this, if not for the meds, I don't think he would be. Really, I could see when, and how he got on the meds, he actually, he went to Hendrick and he made it through Hendrick, which was very challenging. It's an all-boys school. And then he went to URI. And he was working, I mean, no social life, working really hard to get good grades. And he joined this fraternity. And he had another kid actually say that if not for the medication, and this was a Christian fraternity, if not for the medication, he wouldn't be at school, and my son decided to try the meds. He was diagnosed young, he was diagnosed in high school with ADHD. He said, "Oh Dad, I don't want to take the meds." But he took the meds and it's changed his life. So I just say that if kid with ADHD and you start seeing him being apathetic towards school, towards wanting to do his homework, really it's worth a try. We're going to talk about, we're going to demythologize now some of the, I believe, very erroneous information they said about the meds. So, stimulants, demythologizing that. So, I've heard kids, I've got ADHD, I'm already stimulated. So that's not what stimulants mean. It means stimulating the, so if you're on amphetamines, which is Adderall, Vyvanse, it means stimulating the production of dopamine. If you're on methylphenidate, which is Concerta, I think of Ritalin, Concerta and Ritalin, if you're on those, it means actually now causing whatever dopamine is in the cells to actually not be absorbed back in onto the receptor. So it's kind of like how antidepressants work. How they work, they don't produce more serotonin, they just allow more serotonin to remain in the cells in what's called a synaptic cleft. And so instead of it being taken back up, it remains in the cells to be able to work on the brain, on the neural networks. And that's exactly how dopamine works. So it works in two ways. So Adderall and Vyvanse, those are the most effective because they produce more dopamine. Concerta and Ritalin, they just allow more dopamine to remain in the cells that's produced. Dopamine is a very, very important neurotransmitter. So when you see people with that have been diagnosed with schizophrenia, that's an excess of dopamine. When you see people diagnosed with Parkinson's, that's a lack of dopamine. So dopamine is very, very important. All mental illnesses, they actually revolve around neurotransmitters. Now, psychotherapy can shape the brain in such a way where you can actually stimulate the correct production of these neurotransmitters. Like with depression, you can get serotonin working properly again. ADHD is very, very different. There's so many people I have seen come off antidepressants because of therapy. The Lord brought me off antidepressants. I had depression my entire childhood, but ADHD, it's very, very difficult to be effective with ADHD. One, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. The way that these neurotransmitters work and interact, it's more of a biological disease. It's almost like you can't think your way into curing yourself of diabetes. Right, so medication is necessary. And yet some side effects. So yeah, appetite suppression. There is some of that. Now, understand one thing. Most of these side effects go away. But most of these side effects do go away. Insomnia, that happens because clearly now so the intersection of norepinephrine and dopamine, the kid is calmer, but at the same time, the kid is also more alert, of course. Needs to be more alert to be able to study and retain information. And so you have to kind of mess around a little bit in terms of dosage to get the right dosage. Most kids I see with insomnia, it lasts a few weeks and they adjust. Tachycardia, increased heart rate, elevated blood pressure. I typically don't see these in kids or adults. So these studies I've got, they're using humongous samples, really humongous samples to be able to throw everything in the kitchen sink, right, with these samples. But these things are rare. I have seen stomach upset, dizziness, tics in rare cases, but most of the times when there's tics, there's some pre-existence of Tourette's or something like that. I'm not gonna, you can read this. Everyone is getting access to these slides, at least, yes, yeah, okay. So, non-stimulant medication. So I'm gonna go just through a few that I have experience with. I have put others. You can read about those. So I'm gonna go through Strattera, right? So it's a selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. So that's what it does. That's the way that Concerta and Ritalin works. It's a reuptake inhibitor. It doesn't produce more dopamine. It just allows more dopamine to remain in the cells. So it inhibits the uptake of dopamine once it's released into the cells. It inhibits these receptors from taking it back up. And so the advantages, the benefits of it is it doesn't have the abuse potential that stimulants do, and may have a more gradual onset, which is useful for some patients. I've got to say this, in terms of abuse, I have not seen, don't get me wrong, I know, I'm sure it goes on. Over the years, I haven't seen adults or kids abusing these drugs. Now, I do know that there is a black market on college campuses for people who don't even have ADHD to be able to use them to stay up, to study. So I've seen, I haven't seen it, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen people who've been on the meds abusing them. Considerations, it can take several weeks. So because the way that they work, they build up in the system, so it takes several weeks. So stimulants, they're in and out. They're in and out. So they get metabolized very, very quickly, stimulants. These don't, these build up. And the other one I'm gonna go to is, that I've had years and years of experience with, is Wellbutrin, and that's a really interesting drug. It's an atypical antidepressant. So Wellbutrin, actually in the 90s, this thing is like a panacea. I mean, really, it's almost like cod liver oil. It cures everything. So during the 90s, it was called Zyban because it was used for smoking cessation. Then while they were using it for that, the people who were smoking, hey, quit, give me of smoking and my depression. So it was taken up as an antidepressant, and people who were depressed and had ADHD, hey, wait, it's helping with my ADHD too. So it's used as an antidepressant and also an ADHD med. Definitely not as good as stimulants. Nothing is as good as stimulants. Okay. So the rest you can read about. So this is just something about the therapist caregiver bond in terms of therapy. What I do, and what I really wanted, and there's resources there for further study. This is just making sure that parents are educated with their kids, that you make the best possible decisions. There's a lot of erroneous information out there. So I've researched proper scholarly journals and articles, and people also who are not doing research for pharmaceutical companies, because those people are compromised, right? So this is all very objective and just all based on searching out the academic truth. And I just wanted to take questions and answers, because I know that there's a lot of parents that have a lot of questions. If I can demythologize anything, and Annalise is also here, and she can also answer questions alongside me. I'm going to bring Annalise up to introduce herself and see what she does in the school. Yeah, so Annalise.
Okay. I'm Annalise Wheeler. I am the Director of Educational Support Services here. So I work with a variety of students, students with ADHD, learning challenges, etc. So Robert and I have spent a lot of time the last few years working together, and yeah, he's very knowledgeable with us, so I'm happy to be up there with him. So, any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
What is the difference between ADD and ADHD?
So ADD, so right now, when the new DSM-5 came out in 2013, they put them all on one spectrum, right? So ADHD, I totally understand what you mean. See, my son is the most laid-back person you'll ever meet. So he has ADHD, but the inattentive type. He doesn't have any hyperactivity. So the ADHD is the hyperactivity, where you see kids that they fidget, they're restless. Yeah, so you've got that. And then there's the combined type, where they're hyperactive and inattentive. So essentially, you can have a kid that has the inattention, but is not active. He could be laid back, and you would never even know that kid had ADHD.
Except for the memory and the ADHD.
Except for the memory, the inability to be able to focus, yes. And it's the consolidation of memory. And that frustrates a lot of kids in terms of studying. What's the point? I study and I don't do well. But it's only actually taking that information and consolidating it or encoding it as a permanent memory. Once they can do that, they are fine. They can retrieve information. It's just that process of making something short-term, longer-term. And of course, that's very important when studying for exams.
So does all this research also apply to ADD?
It all applies to ADD,
Okay.
all of it, and the combined type, yeah.
And when you say, like, figure it out early, what is the age that you're saying there?
So they say, from 3 to 17. Now, obviously, I am not, and I don't even remember when I've seen a kid as young as 3. I think 4 or 5. I am not suggesting we start putting kids on meds at that age. But I would actually say watch it. If you see any kind of very hyperactive behaviors, any inability to be able to focus for sustained periods of time, just watch it. Also, speak to the child about, oh, do you feel sometimes you can't focus, you can't sit still, or you can't play with one toy for any sustained period of time? That is okay. You can gently kind of bring into play what may be wrong, right? I've seen a lot of cases, and I don't agree with this, where a kid may be systematically stacking toys. Oh, he has ASD. He's autistic. Well, there's a lot more that comes into play. So there's this constellation of symptoms. Let it not just be one thing, right? And on the information, there's all of the symptoms that make for a disorder, because that's what a disorder is, a constellation of symptoms. So, but start speaking with your doctor about it very, very young, and about the age, and if he needs to be on medication. There's a certain age as well that's best for kids. I would say, ideally, teenager. Yeah.
So when I teach kindergarten here.
Yeah.
So when you have the children that I've been teaching
Right.
for 20 years, and you just can tell that they're
Right.
either hyperactive or the girl who
Right.
can't focus and has the memory, and she's inattentive and takes it forever to get her work done, and she needs constant cueing, and
Right.
you have to love her through getting the work done, that whole thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you tell the parents to talk to the pediatrician, and
Yeah.
you don't want to put them on meds too early. You want to
Right.
let them develop and all
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right.
Is there a way to expect them to be able to modify their behavior to like be quieter a little bit when they're just coming, like the hyperactive one
Right.
who's totally distracting everybody
Right.
and talking and moving and can't focus and needs that immediate gratification, can't wait at all for you to get to them.
Right.
And is there a way to like love them into becoming more under control, or?
Great question. So I have done psychotherapeutic techniques with kids, and I've done it with parents and kids who didn't want the meds. But when I have taken them so far and they realize this is as far as we can go this way without meds, it almost becomes convincing to be able to take them down this path, self-convincing for them to be able to see. And the parents who've actually said, well, I think that they need to be on meds, really. And the great thing about meds is parents and the kids, they see the difference right away. I've had kids who struggled doing homework at home, and they're doing the homework in the car on the way to school. Yeah, wow, and they love it. And then you see more confidence. Wow, I am like the rest of the kids. I can do this. And there's a change that occurs in them, even the way they carry themselves, their posture. Yeah.
So in elementary school, from K to 5, you're waiting for them to get into those teenage years when they can start taking the medicine. How do you avoid that depression and anxiety and feeling like they can't do it and they're not worthy and they have?
By speaking to them that you're going to grow into it. It's okay, you are going to grow into it by just saying that, and that's what I did with my son. Yeah, I saw it from a very, very, very young age.
So do you, I just say to the parents, talk to your pediatrician. Do you say anything more than that, or do you just leave it in their hands with the pediatrician?
You leave it in their hands, but also I would say and I can work with teachers and give teachers different resources, and I've done that in the past, that you can use with kids in a class as a way of helping them along. And as I said, once they've tried all of this and they've seen certain improvements, that is very compelling for the parents to actually, because it's, oh, I don't think that they've got that, well, even though other people have told them. But when they see the difference, and I say, listen, medication can make a humongous difference from here. And so that becomes very, very compelling. So I help teachers with resources when parents are somewhat resistant. And I understand, definitely understand.
And I don't really want them to have to put the kid on medicine. I don't, you know, I'm fine with waiting until high school or middle school for that, but you just want the child not to lose their confidence.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would just say is that you are going to grow into it. It is going to get better. You just, as much as you can, encourage the child that this is not the be all and end all, and no, you're very bright. And then you also are going to see these glimpses of when they're incredibly insightful. Just really underscore that.
Well, when you have the time to sit and work with them,
Yeah.
one-on-one, you see it.
Yeah.
And you can see all that intelligence, and you see them so bright and
Right.
happy.
Right.
You just have to give them the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That is really important. A lot of time and a lot of coaching along.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Yes?
Parents that are hesitant to put their child on medication will often look at diet and red food coloring. And do you see any impact of those things on ADHD?
Not significantly. I have seen kids who on the meds who have gone from almost failing to being A students. I mean, it's that dramatic. So I have never seen that with diet. Yeah, and that's why there really is. And when you look at the side effects, there really are no side effects that hurt the kid. And so I have to look at risk to reward, right? So there's a risk of a very, very, very gifted kid now believing he's not a very, very gifted kid, totally living under his potential, being unfulfilled, his God-given potential. He's going to know as he goes throughout life that something's missing. God has put it there. And so you've got that as opposed to temporary side effects. And my son is fine, he's healthy, and all of the kids I've ever seen. So really, when it comes to the risk to reward, it's not worth not doing it. It can make that much difference. Yeah.
I think just adding to that too, it's a trial, right? So you don't have to do a long-term as a
Right.
stimulant, so it's a quick
Right.
in and out.
Right.
It's not something that's like an antidepressant or anything that can make it kind of have an up and a downer.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind too.
Yeah, absolutely. It metabolized fast by the body, really, in and out. And the kids, I have typically, wow, this is great. And it is so gratifying for me to, I don't want to get emotional, to see a kid say to me, I can do it. Really, it's so gratifying. And of course, it's so disheartening to see a kid believe that he cannot. So, yeah, I am trying to demythologize this stuff about meds. There's a lot of stuff that's out there that doesn't come from good sources, really, and it's just nonsense. So there's no such thing as ADHD. I mean, there's stuff out there. There's no such thing as a mental illness. So I just want the parents of the school to be well informed to make the best choices for their kids' success. I know that's what Annalise's department is all about.
Yeah, and I think as a parent too, you know your child, so you have to make that determination for your child. I think a lot of people ask me or you, right, what would you do? It's like, I'm not the parent, so I can't decide that for
Right.
you. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. You are the parent.
Right.
I don't live with your child, you do. So, trialing it is always a great thing, but I would never, make that decision for a parent. That's their decision to make, so.
Right. And I think the Lord has allowed my son to have ADHD because now, of course, I'm an endorser of it. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not just that, well, Mr. Wilson, your kid doesn't have ADHD. Well, he does. So, yeah, and I believe in it. It's made that much of a difference. And I know my son's life would be very, very different. I believe he would have stopped at undergrad. Yeah. So, and that's it. It does make that much of a difference. And I also know if he would have stopped at undergrad, there would have been this sense of unfulfillment inside of him. And you don't want any child, anybody living with that.
Question, so, like, with your son or with, children, when they start the medicine, right, so like, do you think your son, he's in college, when you become an adult, do you have to take the medicine, like, indefinitely because it's helping your brain?
So the prefrontal cortex grows until you're about 30 years old. So there's no doubt about it. ADHD doesn't ever go away, but it can get better as the PFC grows. As you see kids mature, kids who don't become risk takers anymore, they are now more conservative with their decisions. That's because the PFC has grown. And my son has even said, so now, even though he has been on it for so long, he is so great at titrating it around. Throughout the summer, he wasn't even taking it. And so he knows how to titrate it for when he does his homework and things like that. And he is on a smaller dose now than when he started. Because his PA is 25, so his PFC is growing. And he said to me that my ultimate goal is one day is to get off of it. So, and that is definitely more likely as a child becomes an adult, or to at least require a smaller amount of it. Any other questions? We should be asking anybody in TV land, yeah. Anything you want to say? Anything else about it?
There are just some really great resources. There's a new book out. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard great things. It's called ADHD is Awesome. It's on Amazon. I saw it there. I checked it the other day and ordered it. I just have to read it now. But it just talks about, living in the ADHD brain and being able to get through life. This guy and his wife kind of do it back and forth in the book. She doesn't have ADHD and he does, and they kind of go back and forth between how their lives are a little bit different than each other. It's pretty cool. So based on what I've heard, it's a great book. There's some other really great resources called attitudemag.com. And it has just really great resources for parents on strategies to use at home with their child who has ADHD, different resources for, checklists and all that stuff that a child might struggle with executive dysfunction. So check those out. There's a lot of stuff out there that you can use at home to help your child too.
Absolutely, and a book I would recommend is a book by Halliwell. He's an MD that has ADHD. It's called Driven to Distraction. It's a great book, really great book. So, plus those resources that Annalise is giving, and there's so many resources here for you to do further study. And once again, they are not compromised. They are not pharmaceutical companies, because a lot of pharmaceutical companies fund research, and of course that's compromised. So yes.
Oh, I have a question. So in order to get diagnosed with ADHD, do you have to do the neuropsych test, or are there other ways to?
So I diagnose people with ADHD all the time. So the neuropsych test is necessary to get accommodations. So I saw my son had ADHD, but in order to get his accommodations in law school, he had to do a neuropsych test. Yeah, so yeah.
So what you're saying is, someone can get diagnosed with ADHD
Right.
by a licensed mental health
Yeah.
professional, and they don't have to do the neuropsych.
They don't have to do the neuropsych test, but you have to do the neuropsych test to get accommodations. Yeah, yeah. But to get on the meds and all that, yeah, it's we go through the DSM. I've got a small one.
The Vanderbilt, yeah.
Yeah.
Your doctor would do the Vanderbilt rating form.
Yeah.
They would have you and the pediatrician would fill it out, and then a
So-
teacher.
This is a small one, so the big one just didn't want to have a workout today because the big one is huge, but this is a small one, and you go through the diagnostic criteria, and yeah, it's all standard. It's global.
So what, does any licensed mental health professional can do that, or there are certain
Yeah.
credentials in order to?
Yeah,
to
the license, yeah, they can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
But your pediatrician
can do that.
can diagnose.
Yeah, oh yeah,
And give medication.
yeah, that's
So
correct.
right through the rating scales that would for your
Right.
pediatrician.
Mhm.
And then a neuropsych, you would need to go
Mhm.
Yeah.
to the right professional for that.
And what I do when someone also comes with me and they suspect that they've got, I also send you home assessments that you can do right there at home. Okay, so, yeah, and that's a great thing in terms of detection now, is just all these things being ubiquitous everywhere, and you being able to, oh, yeah, that's it. Here's one other thing too, is that we should not, there are certain kids who are very, I know, enthusiastic and kind of hyper in personality. We should also make sure that those things are not being pathologized, right? Because that could be somebody's personality. Okay, so we have to make sure that all the symptoms are there that meet the diagnostic label.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
good.
That plant just suddenly took over.